Welcome back to Games Revealed. I'm Jameson Also Brink, and we are one. So today I want to talk about what we're throwing into the ring today, and that is the Nintendo Switch versus the Valve Steam Deck. Yes, you heard it right. It's the matchup of the handhelds. I'm going to be sticking with the base Switch, not the OLED. And then with the Steam Deck, it's obviously just they're all about the same except for the storage. So that's our lineup today. And I think we're kind of gonna know who's gonna win, but I think you'll be surprised by the conclusions that I'm gonna have at the end and some of the way we're gonna go about this. So before we get into it, make sure to like, subscribe, bash that bell with your crowbar. Now let's get into this beautiful fight of ours, because both are great devices. Just depends on what you want to play. Okay, first up, let's go over the specs. The Switch has a 6.2-inch 1280 by 720 screen. And then the Steam Deck has a 7-inch 1280 by 800 screen with a 16 by 10 ratio, where the Switch is a 16 by 9, with both screens being 60 hertz. Then we have the Switch that has an NVIDIA custom Tegra processor. It's a little old, but it is good. Then we have, with the Steam Deck, an AMD Von Go. Also, the Tekken, it's a little old, not nearly as old as the Tegra, and it is also pretty good. With that comes this next spec, which is RAM, 4 gigabytes of LPDDR4 for the Switch versus the 16 gigs in the Steam Deck. Now, obviously we know who's going to win in this area right here, right? So let's get into the last little bit, and then we'll do a little bit of comparison on the pure specs and kind of who I think wins. Obviously, we're going to know, but the 4300 milliamp battery versus the 5200 milliamp battery, which is in the Steam Deck. The deck has more battery life. And no surprise, it's also a lot bigger. So in the end, spec-wise, obviously we're going to give it the Steam Deck. It is much older. With that, it's not really the most fair of comparisons, but with the form factor of the Switch, it's honestly pretty portable. It really comes down to what do you need when it comes to these specs. But overall, the Steam Deck obviously is just so much newer. And honestly, I wish I had a Switch 2 here to compare, but Nintendo refuses to release this. So I'd much prefer to have this battle be Switch 2 versus Steam Deck, but maybe in the near future. Okay, next up in the ring is performance differences. The Switch has a much lower resolution, and that's going to very much hinder it. The Switch also runs at a much lower FPS when optimized as opposed to the Steam Deck. Now, the Steam Deck has different variations you can go about to make it whatever you want of an experience. So there is no true optimized section for the Steam Deck, except for some games do have optimized, and even those aren't amazing. With the Cyberpunk 2077 one, as an example, it's not the greatest optimization, I'll admit, but it's maybe closer to what the Switch might have if it had, an optimized. They usually aim for around 30 frames, not, the sexy 40 to 45 frames per second that we like to get on our Steam Deck. Then also the textures are going to be much leaner, much blurrier in the Switch as opposed to the Steam Deck. Now, I will say, also, with that FSR with the Steam Deck has more of a win too there, because it can help smooth out those textures, fill in gaps, and have a much lower resolution while still not losing a lot of quality. So once again, the Steam Deck is really kind of it's gonna be doing very well in this realm because of its newer tech. And there's been a lot of cool things like with the FSR 2.0 that have come out that have really helped, and I'm really excited to see what the Switch 2 has if they ever release it.
Now, I just need to preface, I don't focus on lighting or particle effects or any additional rendering beyond the textures and the couple of other things I've already mentioned. I might do that in another video. I really just stick to the most glaring pieces to me, which was the resolution and texture details. Also, lighting, though, is another probably secondary one that is pretty big in some of the games. It's just the games I played, it seemed more with the textures and the lighting, but you can still see the lighting. So take that into consideration with this.
Now, let's get into a little bit of game comparison to just map what we just talked about into visuals. So, first up, with the games, though, I do want to mention Switch has 4,403 Switch games, roughly, right now. And then you have Steam Deck, which has 4,450 Steam Deck verified or playable games in the Steam store. That does not include the games that do work. Plenty I have tried that are not verified, that work just fine or work better than some playable versions. And also doesn't include Epic Games Store. It does not include old games that I've played, in the past. Those games take a little bit more work to get going, and plus I couldn't get a good list of that. So, with that, let's move on to some of these games. We'll talk about the games a little bit, and then you can also visually see them and maybe get a little bit more of a comparison of for yourself. I will say, some of the things I'm going to say might not translate well enough into what you're going to see. I don't know. This is what I saw when I was gaming. Coming up with first is The Witcher 3. Witcher 3 is an amazing game. I love it. It's open world. It's not the most optimized open world that I've played, but it is beautiful if played on a beefy enough PC. I will say, in the end, neither of these devices fully put my little stamp of approval of looking really good, because I played it, I played it a few years ago on a decent enough PC, and that's what my perception of the game is. But still, there is a winner here, and there's going to be a winner here. You'll be surprised. There's going to be one or two that the Switch gets, but Witcher 3, it looks amazing on the Steam Deck for what it is, but still does not beat a normal PC, even just a mid-range. Let's say if you got a 3060, PC these days, obviously it's going to beat the Steam Deck, but it just looks that much better on something like that. But if you need to play Witcher 3 on the go, it's still going to be so much better than the potato graphics we have on the Switch. The Switch, I cannot play that game. It is optimized enough to work. I was surprised, but they're able to do some magic over there. The Witcher 3 still has very low resolution. The resolution, I don't know what the resolution is, but if you look at it, it is very low. The textures are very lean. And then also the FPS is allowed to dip a lot more. That being said, the Steam Deck's FPS still does dip too. It doesn't hold a very steady rate when you're in medium. Now, if you drop that down to a medium low settings, then you're looking at some pretty good times of about 45 frames consistently. It still drops more than I would like it to be for a consistent thing, but it still looks better than the Switch, which looks like it's lower than the low on the Steam Deck almost. Now, if you've ever played with Witcher 3, those graphics can get super low. They can look even worse than what I've seen on the Switch. So at least it's not the lowest of the low, but man, it is frustrating to play the Witcher 3 on the Switch. For me, it is, personally. It is much better on the Steam Deck. And then also with that, both kind of the area that I showed off in these videos, it's a little too bright. But you know what? A little brightness in our lives is always good. Okay, next up, the next game is Red Faction Guerrilla Remastered. This is a game I chose. Well, a lot of these games I chose because that's what I have to compare. These are the games I have on Switch, and these are the games I could compare on my Steam account, from my Steam account. So the Red Faction Guerrilla Remastered is, I haven't fully played through the Remastered, but I played the original, love the game. It's fun, get to go around Mars destroying stuff. Now, with this, the biggest differences for me were once again resolution and textures, but it wasn't as wide of a difference than something like Witcher 3 or some of the other games we're going to go about. It was actually surprisingly enough not the biggest difference. And now this, I think, mostly comes from, I believe I maxed out most of the stuff on the Steam Deck. The Switch must come in pretty close with a lower FPS. It was a little more laggy for me when I was playing through certain parts, but Red Faction Guerrilla Remastered still looked decent enough on both. It actually, honestly, it's a toss-up for me on this one. Like with Witcher 3, where the Steam Deck won, this one, you're going to have a good time either way. It edges out a little bit more on Steam Deck, obviously, just because it's able to just have that much more performance with FPS, but I think you'll still have a pretty good time with either. That being said, if you do destroy a large enough structure, that's where this Switch obviously starts to really chug. But still, it's still a fun game. You're going to have a fun time no matter what on that. Okay, next up is Subnautica Below Zero. This is one that is going to look better on the Steam Deck, but I'm still surprised that the Switch can play. This is a weird one. The optimization in this is a little weird, and honestly, it doesn't even look amazing on the Steam Deck, but it is still looks better than the Switch. I'm hoping that these games come out with more optimized versions for these handhelds, but nonetheless, you're able to play Subnautica Below Zero and see those cute little penguin-like creatures in a little bit better detail on the Steam Deck. Most of these games that we're going to be talking about, it's textures and resolutions and FPS, baby. That's the big difference, and that's, it's just the way it is. The Steam Deck is twice as big. It's got, a good lead on tech over the Switch. It's still pretty amazing the Switch is able to keep up, though. Subnautica is fun enough on the Switch. Just, it's not, I wouldn't really recommend playing Subnautica on the Switch, I'll be honest. If you have to, it's the only device you have, do it because Subnautica is a good game. But besides that, Steam Deck is just by far. If you have both, you're going to have a much better time in Subnautica on the Steam Deck. Okay, let's go over to Resident Evil 0. This is one that surprised me a little bit, honestly. This is an old enough game. It originally came out on the GameCube. It came out with essentially the remasters of the time, with Resident Evil 1 being remastered from the PlayStation era into the GameCube era, and these are fun games. Resident Evil 0 was a pretty decent game. I liked it a lot. Now, the graphics, the textures, the resolution is where, once again, the Steam Deck wins out. I was actually surprised. It's definitely, for me, much more clear on the Steam Deck than it is the Switch. And I thought this was going to be just like, it's going to look about the same. And maybe to you guys it does. For me, it does not. It looks quite a bit better on the Steam Deck and performs better, except for the cutscenes. There's an issue with the cutscenes on the Steam Deck. So I'm going to put it at an even, little bit of even score here between the two, in the sense of I can just run Resident Evil 0. It runs fine. It looks better on the Steam Deck, but you have some issues with the videos that you have to then play around with your Proton versioning, which anytime you have to deviate from that, I feel like the Switch with the console likeness is going to win a little bit more when you just want to play a game. That's fine. Okay, next up is Bioshock Remaster. This is one where it definitely does look better on the Steam Deck, and with FSR 2.0 enabled, it definitely gives that clarity, and you can up those graphics or whatever. It's not a very demanding game, so it's not going to look that much better than the Switch version, but it definitely, you can pump that FPS up, you can make it so it looks a little better, and it's a little less sluggish. It's a fun game. It's definitely what I recommend playing, and you can definitely tell that they had to reduce a couple of textures and resolutions and whatnot in the Bioshock Switch version. Okay, next up is Darkest Dungeon. This is the one where the Switch wins, and that's a big part is it's kind of annoying to get Darkest Dungeons to work on the Steam Deck. It just is. I'm just going to leave it at that. It is kind of annoying on the Steam Deck with the controls, whatever it is. I'm sure you can map it out much better than I did. It doesn't matter. I'm kind of going after what can you just play that's on both. So maybe it's not fair, maybe it is, but they both look great on both devices. It is a 2D Rogue, so it's not like it's going to require a lot, but it works real. I like it a lot on the Switch, and so I'm going to give it a Switch on this one over the Steam Deck. Then, last but not least, we have Doom Eternal. This is one that is interesting, that it runs decent enough on the Switch, but the Steam Deck just does so well. I can play at about medium to high settings on this. I've done high and I did pretty well, but I only played the first level, so I can't say that high is going to work great until the end, but it looks really good. I can run it around about 40 to 60 frames per second, and I usually will, if I lower it down to like medium high, I can get 60 frames, and I love that game with 60. Just, bashing demons without a care in the world with the music and just loving life. It runs great on the Steam Deck. Now with the Switch, I actually don't have this game, but I put it on this because I actually think this is a big plus for Switch that they're able to play this game. This game looks good enough on the Switch, and I'm not going to give it to an even score or whatever this is, but the Switch, I just want to mention that I'm surprised that it can do this, and it's cool. It's cool that they were able to push the graphics to this point, and with such old tech. So I just want to say that with Steam Deck still, doing better, and it's one I definitely recommend Doom Eternal on the Steam Deck. I mean, it's better with a mouse and keyboard, but you can hook one of those up to your Steam Deck. So Doom Eternal, it's amazing. Gotta play it. Okay, and so I want to get into a little bit of the optimizations. I've talked about this already, but I do want to preface this. This is really important because this is where Switch does really well, and it's been able to just do so well to this point. Switch games are highly optimized, meaning the developers and probably Nintendo sat down and tweak the settings as much as possible to benefit with the deck specs. It has only 4 gigabytes of RAM to deal with, and as opposed to, much beefier systems like the Steam Deck. That's a big deal. They have a lot of other things they need to just tweak. It takes a lot more, let's say, on the Steam Deck to do that type of thing. So if these were equal spec devices, the Switch would win almost always because it's able to optimize to such a degree that it can really get some surprising performance. That's if they keep into mind, like, hey, maybe I want a little less visuals, a little bit more performance, get that 60 frames going. That's where I really like the Switch or the Steam Deck and how it handles just being able to switch between the different modes of, hey, I want it to be 30 frames, I want it to be 60, and just maybe look less impressive. It gives you options, and I love that. Yes, you have to tinker around more, but there's sites out there that you can find good specs, settings to set to work with whatever you're trying to hit with those ranges, the 30 to 60 FPS range. The deck just has to depend on its raw performance. It does well. It has to rely on that. So that's why some of the games on here actually got close enough to the performance with the Steam Deck. That being said, some of them were older games. I get that, but the Steam Deck was just able to the Switch was able to keep up just well enough because of its optimization as opposed to the Steam Deck where it's not. Now let's go on to what you should choose. Which system can you play? Like, are you wanting to play more? Like, there's choices here, and surprisingly enough, I'm gonna have a winner at the end, and I think we're gonna know what it is. But there is a place for Switch, and it might beat out the Steam Deck for what your needs are. If you want to play Nintendo Switch first-party games like Breath of the Wild or whatnot, you have to find a right Switch, be able to rip those off into ROMs and put them on your deck. You're gonna have to do that to play that. That's really frustrating and can be very fairly enough expensive. So if the biggest thing you want to do is play Switch games, I would probably avoid the Steam Deck, especially if it's just first party. But I think you'd be surprised, honestly. I'll give this. If you even have an inkling of playing some, third party games, and maybe you've been a Nintendo fanboy for a while, maybe you might want to venture out into Steam Deck and see what there is there that you've been missing out. There's some pretty good games, honestly. So we could list a couple a little later what you're kind of missing out on if you're going that route. Now, the deck has a very massive game library and a lot of potential, but it is only at this point it's gotten a little bit more than the Switch now, the Steam Deck with the verified and playable. There's still a lot more games on the Steam store that are going to get verified over the years, over the months, whatever it is. That library is going to continue to grow, and it's going to ultimately just destroy Nintendo and Switch's library. It's just a matter of time. It's the whole industry, essentially. I mean, technically, the Steam Deck could play about any game if Proton allows or if it's tweaked properly. So eventually, in theory, you could play almost every game on this thing if given enough time. And the Switch really does have a good lineup of games. It's just, they can only, these studios that they have can only pump out so many games at once, where, the PC is supported by so many developers. Now, like I said, if the Switch 2 is out, this would be a completely different thing. I actually think the performance would be a little better on the Switch 2, honestly. We'll see, though. And if they continue to do a Tegra APU by NVIDIA, we'll see we'll see down the road on that. But I think we would have a different realm of how the games perform, what kind of games there are. But still, it's hard to beat just having your Steam library on the go. And in the end, for me, games do matter. We'll get to that in a second. If you have money for both, get both. If you have any inkling to play some of the Switch games, maybe just get both supported. They're both great devices. I'm not going to say it ultimately like one's bad. They're not. They're both great. But the winner is Steam Deck, obviously. But they could go different with the Switch 2, maybe. The only problem is ultimately the reason why I chose the Steam Deck, and it's not actually because of the graphics. Funny enough, it's actually because it has my Steam library. Now, when I buy a game on my Steam library, I can play it on my PC. I can play it on my Steam Deck. I can play it on my laptop. I'm going to be able to play it on the Steam Deck 2, the Steam Deck 3, if Valve counts the 3 on their consoles. I'm going to be able to play my library forever. I'm able to play other games that I've played or in the past on older systems, like Sacrifice on my Steam Deck. It's pretty impressive that I was able to do that. That is ultimately why the Steam Deck wins, and why I would probably, even if the Switch 2 came out, had better graphics, which it probably will, why the Steam Deck would beat it. And it can emulate Switch games. So ultimately, in the end, it isn't the ultimate device, but it also comes down to what are your needs. But my needs are, I want my library on my Steam Deck. I want to buy into an ecosystem that is going to continue on for generations and not milk me like the Switch Nintendo stuff does. It really, like, paying for some of those old games through a subscription service really killed it for me. So now, just a little tantalizing end to this. Here's a couple of games that you're missing out on if you like, and I tend to like horror a little bit more. So these are very heavily influenced by that and stuff I've done in the past. Dead Space 2, Evil Within 2, Shadow of Mordor, Resident Evil 2, the remake. These are games that you're missing out on if you are playing the Switch only. If you got yourself a PC or a Steam Deck, then you're able to enjoy it. I just want to say that. I just want to preface that there's a lot of fun things that you might have missed on the go with just using a Switch. And that is the beauty of the Steam Deck, is that it has some of my favorite games and some games that you might like if you just give it a try. So in the end, I love both systems. I loved my Switch, and honestly, I want the Switch too. They're just Nintendo is not really giving me a lot of hope for what is to come in the future, while Steam Deck is giving me a reason to invest in an ecosystem that I can continue to play for decades. That is a big deal. It's almost like investing my money into something where the return is I can continue playing it for decades to come and not have to rebuy things. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing, as long as developers don't pull them from the stores. But as long as you buy it, you have access to it. That's usually how Steam works. So with that being said, this is the end of the video. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think? Which one wins? Switch versus Steam Deck? Who is the ultimate winner? I want to know what you guys think. And also, why do you think it is the ultimate winner out of the two? And then what other device should I compare the Steam Deck in the future? I'm going to have to get my hands on it. So I'm going to have to formulate a way to get it. So maybe you can give me a hint there too. Thank you guys for watching. Check out my other videos. Check out the description below. It has all the accessories that you're going to need for your Steam Deck that might be coming soon. It also has other things like the Discord server where we enjoy chatting with each other and helping each other out and just playing games together. It's a great place to go, so make sure to check it out. Check out my other videos, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out. Later!